we're putting in place a number of sustainability measures, and we will monitor it and publish those findings, and we will make the project available to the public for demonstration purposes for a period of time before it's actually occupied, and we'll ensure that it gets maximum exposure through the newspapers. We're running a number of symposia. For example, we had occasion to be exposed to the work that was being done by not only academics but also architects in the private sector on the issue of medium density housing. And none of them knew about the existence of the other. So our symposium in this instance is bringing together all of those people so that they can talk to one another about what they're doing, and at the same time bring in some key government department people so they can hear what is being pursued. And we do research. And the research really is there to collect a useful database of best practice examples of building types from around the world, so that we can draw on it to demonstrate what is possible when doubt is expressed about going down a particular line. So that's a very quick snapshot of what our office is attempting to do. Now, as I suggested, there's a few examples of the good design publications. The first one simply was looking at what is good design. We then looked at ecological sustainability, good design in the coast, and that was directed towards a number of local authorities in coastal settings that were seeking some assistance on this question. Good design and local government, where we talk about things like design review panels, establishing exemplars of good design in their own local authority area so that people can be directed to it, etc. And the most recent one we released was good design and transport, and the Victorian government has recently announced a substantial commitment of funds towards new public transport, and there's a very large role for architects, urban designers and landscape architects to play in delivering that work. This is Melbourne. Many of you will be familiar with the city. I'm a relatively recent newcomer to it. I've had involvement in the place probably for the last 10 years or so, and I've watched it change and evolve in a very positive way during that time. And it's come about really, I think, through the fact that Melbourneites are really proud of their city. They embrace it wholeheartedly. They have considerable pride in it, and they recognise the public realm to be a quality public realm. And this makes a profound difference to the way that public realm is treated, and we've already heard that from our earlier speakers. More and more emerging in the city is a definition of a number of precincts, and we're doing our best in the office to ensure that those precincts do establish not only a character of their own, but do allow infiltration by other uses, and that is the case. It's a pretty enlightened government and local authority to be working with in that respect. Now, when I first took on the role of government architect in Western Australia, which I fulfilled for nearly 5 years, there had been no previous government architect in the role, and there was no manual that set out how to do it. The role of government architect really came about through the fact that all the old public works departments were abolished. The role of principal architect running a large drawing office with many, many architects and other professionals in there supporting disappeared through the normal issue of cost, economic rationalism, etc. And as a result, there was a slow diminution in the quality of building that was emerging for government. So the question arose, how can we arrest this? What can we put in place to turn it around? And it was suggested that a government architect might be able to do that. It was a big ask. So the research I did to find out what was being done around the world took me unexpectedly to the United Kingdom. Unexpectedly, I say, because I'd actually done postgraduate study in the UK in the early 80s, and it wasn't then exactly the pin-up boy of quality architecture. However, when Blair came to power, he did some very interesting things, and one of the documents he produced was this one, Better Public Buildings, where he talks very pointedly in the foreword that he writes for it about the need for governments to leave legacies, about a recognition that the public works that had been built in the UK over the past period of time were of a quality that they did not wish to sustain, that they had to make a step change. And Blair cleverly got together all the heavy hitters in government to sit on this committee so that the message was able to filter down from the very top position. And this is, to me, a critically important aspect of the potential of success in a role like government architect. If it's not supported from the top, it's extremely difficult to make it work. If that vision isn't there for what the city might be, you're coming in at a middle level and you're having to fight upwards and downwards all the time, and it's a really quite thankless task. So there does need to be, I believe, a strong message from the top that we support the ambitions of a role like this. Fortunately, in the UK at that time, leading up to the new millennium, there'd been a number of projects, all of which had received some additional funding beyond their kind of base funding from the Lotteries Commission. And you're probably all very familiar with these projects, running from the Millennium Bridge to the British Museum, Tate Modern, the Stonehenge Visitor Centre, which has been stalled for the last 10 years. It's only now starting to be built through an appalling approvals process, which has seen it relocated to a different site to accommodate a freeway. We won't go there. And the final image is that of one of the Jubilee line extension stations. And it's a very interesting case study, the Jubilee line extension. It was virtually curated by an architect, Roland Paulotti, where he did some things that the previous tube stations in London had never dreamt of doing, like bringing natural light onto the platforms and creating spaces that could be understood as civic and pleasurable, places that you took pleasure in occupying rather than spaces that you wanted to speed out of as quickly as possible. It was a recognition that these major public transport hubs can become the civic places of this century. So there was this as a precedent for Blair and this heavy-hitting crew looking at better public buildings to point out to the public and to demonstrate that these show what can be done if we really put our shoulder to the wheel. The Prime Minister did establish also a Better Public Buildings Award, and again, an important point because it demonstrates once again from the top that this is regarded as an important thing to do, a really important thing to do. You won't be able to read that, but in the Better Public Buildings document, which can be downloaded from the CABE website, and I'll talk about that a little more shortly, there's a series of things where they say stop doing certain things and start doing others. And the key thing is to stop regarding design as an extra that you add on. You regard it much more as an absolute fundamental in going ahead and procuring a major project. There are some very good arguments in this document. Now, from all this process, CABE grew, the Commission for Architecture and the Built Environment, and it kind of morphed out of what had been a kind of good taste commission sitting in the Royal Academy and became something very substantial. And it now is quite a large outfit. Some say it's become too large and rather unwieldy, but I've made several visits to CABE and sat in on a number of their processes, and I remain very impressed by the way they operate. This is claimed as the mission for CABE, the expert advisor on architecture, urban design and public space. So again, all embracing, not attempting to separate out any of those built environment disciplines. And their mission, and I think that's worth reading out, to inject excellence in architecture and urban design into the lifeblood of the nation. And they develop a series of strategies to enable that to occur. They do advise very directly on key development. CABE has no legislative clout to do so. It's all done through a kind of moral authority that occurs as a result of government agencies and local authorities referring to CABE for design review any project that they deem to be strategic for whatever reason.